There's plenty of rumors going around about the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I mean, they've always been there, but recently, after the very negative article by Variety and the end of the actor strike, they've gone into overdrive. What's gonna happen? Will Pedro Pascal play Reed Richards? Will they bring back Robert Downey Jr. or Scarlett Johansson for Secret Wars? Will Silver Surfer be a woman? Look, take it all with a grain of salt. Enjoy the totally real leaks that use bad Photoshop and AI all you want. I'm not gonna yuck anyone's yum or tell you how to live your life, but one of the biggest characters that always seems to pop up in all of these rumors is Doctor Doom. He's in just so many of these casting rumors, leaked post-credit scenes, or even just that he's going to be the next big bad for the next film. And I mean, the biggest question that these totally real and totally trusted sources are preying on is that everyone is wondering when he's actually going to show up. Well, it won't take some insider information to make an educated guess that he's probably going to show up in Avengers Secret Wars. After all, both versions of the story in the comic books did include Doctor Doom as a major character. There's always the Fantastic Four film, although I think that film has a plethora of other issues they need to tackle first before they add in Doctor Doom. With everything currently laid out exactly as we officially know it, and how the MCU has been set up ever since 2008, I just don't see any feasible way of properly giving the greatest villain in comic book history his due. And I believe the only way that would be possible is if he was given his own solo film between Kang Dynasty and Secret Wars. And this film could revitalize fan interest, be something wholly original, and hype everyone up for what should be the best culmination of everything Marvel has ever done. Let me explain. To begin, let's look at how Victor Von Doom has appeared in every cinematic outing so far. Him and Reed went to college together, and an experiment goes wrong. Yes, those are key moments from the comics, just very much out of context, but sure. Then they always tie in Doctor Doom getting some abilities the same way the Fantastic Four get theirs. The Corman version makes him a mustache-twirling villain who just wants to steal a diamond infused with the cosmic radiation that gave them their powers or whatever. The 2005 and 2007 version, directed by Tim Story, he's a corporate billionaire who wants to use his power for revenge? That's not really made clear. And the 2015 Josh Trank version of Doom is once again with them in a parallel dimension to get their powers, and he wants to destroy the world, and it's even less clear. All film versions so far also have a weird thing about Victor being bitterly in love with Sue. That's just not a thing in the comics. Namor totally does, but never Doctor Doom. Well, there was the marriage where it was actually secretly Reed taking over Doom's body so they could force a peace agreement with Latveria, and he did marry an alternate reality version of Sue in Secret Wars, but that's different. The Doctor Doom that comic book readers just can't get enough of is completely different. He's actually far more complex than you've been led to believe. With all the retcons that usually fill comic books, his story has actually remained consistent throughout the years. It all begins when he was born in a small Romani camp in the fictional Latveria. His mother Cynthia gets fed up with all the persecution, bigotry, and outright hatred done to her people, and she learns dark magic to defend herself. She finally reaches her breaking point when she just wants a better life for her son, so she makes a deal for her soul with Mephisto to put an end to all the vile things the local baron has done to the Romani people. As it usually goes when you make a deal with the literal devil, she loses her powers just after the deed is done, and just when the townsfolk find her and kill her. Victor and his dad try fleeing to the mountains, but his dad freezes to death trying to keep him warm throughout the winter night. Don't get me wrong, an adult Doctor Doom does in fact hate Reed Richards, but his entire motivation isn't just to be evil or to be powerful for the sake of power. It's to be powerful enough to kill the devil that took his parents away from him. And that's exactly what he becomes. He learns magic to a level that rivals Doctor Strange. He learns science to a level that rivals Iron Man. And even without either of those, he learns to fight to a level that rivals Taskmaster. He also became the sovereign ruler of Latveria, and is one of the richest people in Marvel, even without accounting for all the state assets. And then he finally goes to college, where he meets a young Reed Richards. And of course, to put it in the nicest terms possible, Reed wasn't the superhero we know yet, and he was a little prick who couldn't stand having an equal. One day, Victor creates a machine that finally lets him travel to hell to get his mother's soul back. And then, boom, the machine explodes when he's almost able to sneak his mother's soul free. The explosion scars his face and he's expelled from college. Victor blames Reed for tampering with the machine. Reed blames Victor's faulty equations. Who knows? But the blame game does solidify their hatred for each other. And in case you're wondering, in a non-exactly confirmed to be non-canon moment from the Age of Ultron's comic, Ben Grimm actually admits to being the one who messed with Dr. Doom's machine, so... Which brings me to, in my opinion, one of the most interesting character traits of Dr. Doom. That scar on his face from the explosion and what it actually represents. For the most part, the initial scar from the accident really wasn't that bad. In an unpublished Jack Kirby sketch that shows just a single scar down his right eyebrow and eye. And in Fantastic Four number 278, we finally see what it looks like canonically, and it's just a burn down his left cheek. I mean, yeah, it's not ideal, but it's not the end of the world. Yet, Doom doesn't see it that way because his greatest character flaw, his perfectionism. He doesn't need to be good, he needs to be the best. He needs to be so far ahead of the rest of the group that no one can even come close to reaching him, because he needs to think of everything that way. And again, he was just born a regular human being, and he's trying to take down the devil. Being good enough just won't do. And yet, he's scarred. A single blemish that any normal person would just see as a scar. But it's a reminder that he's not perfect, he's not good enough, that his machine wasn't good enough to save his mother, and that scar will forever remind him of that day. So what does he do? He chooses to wear a burdensome heavy metal mask that was forged by the Tibetan monks. He was so ashamed that he couldn't even wait for the mask to cool down and just put the hot metal directly on his skin, which damaged his face even further. Also just want to point out the most unintentionally hilarious panel in all of comic book history. I don't know, I just love that bit so much. Dr. Doom is essentially the Dark Mirror version of Mr. Fantastic. Both are unimaginably intelligent. Both constantly yearn for more knowledge. And both of them, if left to their own devices, will easily overlook their humanity if that means getting what they want. It's the rest of the Fantastic Four that ground him and remind him what all of this is done for. They've both become immensely powerful, but it's Sue, Johnny, Ben, Franklin, and Valeria who guide him to do good. Doom doesn't have any of that, and he doesn't feel like he deserves or even wants it. All this perfectly plays into Doom's other biggest flaw, his self-reliance. His unwillingness to trust anyone else other than the robots he creates. He doesn't even really team up with other supervillains too often, and even then, he's always trying to be their leader. Dr. Doom will always lose in the end because he backstabs everybody around him, and then all of the good guys will come together to stop him. And in case I glossed over it, he is in fact evil. He has absolutely no empathy for others, including the people of Latveria, which he rules over with an iron fist. He uses and abuses people for his own gain, like he sacrificed his teenage sweetheart for a new set of armor, or played with Wanda's heart to steal her chaos magic, or even when he saved all of the remaining realities in Secret Wars, it was also to make himself the God Emperor of the Ashes, and after the good guys win in the end, he still wiped everyone's memories of the second Secret Wars, and he'd rather go back to zero than lose to Reed. His face was returned to normal by the end of the story, so at least he does get a consolation prize for doing good at least once. Which brings us to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The only way to properly build up Dr. Doom as a truly game-changing villain is to not tie his backstory as closely into the Fantastic Fours as the other films have. Think about it. He would lose so much credibility if he was just seen as Reed's arch-nemesis, instead of being a villain that could be a foil to literally everyone else in the MCU. For their film, Fantastic Four have many other villains to choose from. I even think Annihilus would be better suited for their first outing in the MCU. The filmmakers are going to run into the glaringly obvious plot hole of, why didn't the Fantastic Four show up in Endgame? So the solution is to either make them from an alternate reality, which would lower the stakes significantly, and even the slightest whiff of them not being important will kill any fan interest in the film. Or what I think would be the better route is if the Fantastic Four have always been in the main MCU Earth, but stuck in the negative zone for a while. The negative zone is the space between the realities, which is kind of important right now because it's basically all the blank space between the multiverses, and could be interpreted as where the TVA and the end of time from Loki could be set in. And I personally think that the Fantastic Four should first be set in the 2000s. They can hide away in the Baxter Building, but maybe fight Mole Man? I don't know. Then the Fantastic Four could have been stuck in the negative zone in 2007. A nice little nod to the last Fantastic Four film which starred Chris Evans. This way, Nick Fury could be aware of them too, see that a superhero team could work, and let that inspire him to go forward with the Avengers initiative. That would also explain why he didn't make any progress from 1995 to 2008, and it would be a nice meta nod for how Marvel's first family inspired the creation of the Avengers, and how the 2000s wave of superhero films led us to the MCU. They can also address how Miss Marvel's bangles in the quantum realm actually work, deal with Annihilus, and then come back to over 20 years later to a world that's now obsessed with superheroes. Johnny can now fully embrace being the showboat of the team, while Sue and Ben can now go out in public with at least a little bit less ridicule. As Reed looks off into the distance, he finally sees what became of an old foundation that he started back in the 2000s. They've now become the new buyer of the old Avengers Tower, the Future Foundation, which is now run by Dr. Doom. And this is sort of what happens to the Future Foundation in the comics. And I guess it is a lot less conspicuous than literally naming his company Von Doom Industries. The next films in the MCU are Thunderbolts and Blade. I don't see them really setting up anything major needed for a climactic Avengers film. And Avengers King Dynasty itself has a lot of legwork to do to immediately jump in and to catch everyone up to speed on what happened in Phase 4, 5, and now 6. And if Secret Wars is supposed to be this gigantic love letter to all Marvel films, well, I think Dr. Doom could be that love letter specifically to the MCU. Obviously, Doom is the main character. Give him his true origin story and powers completely untied to the Reed Richards. They can meet in college but then go their separate ways again. It would be about how Doctor Doom has always been in the shadows of the MCU. He was learning magic and camouflage, taking over the weapons trade after Hammer Industries failed, reorganized Eastern Europe to rule a Latveria that would invade a weakened Sokovia. All of this in an effort to take down Mephisto. And of course, they really need to start working all this in to start bringing him into the MCU. Tie him in with Ironheart because the Hood and Mephisto are supposedly showing up. Make his mom tied to Agatha Darkhold Diaries as the third witch in the Coven. Bring him into Armor Wars to adapt the infamous Iron Man story where Doom became the next Iron Man after Tony died. Whatever it takes to make Doctor Doom stand out from the admittedly weak lot of MCU villains. Because he is not just some random villain that can be defeated in one movie and forgotten about forever. He's the greatest villain Marvel Comics has ever created, and if Marvel can use him right, he could be the focal point of the entire franchise for decades to come. Now how's that for coming up with fan service for the MCU? But I want to hear from you guys. How do you think we're finally going to get Doctor Doom in the MCU? Let me know in the comments down below. And of course, if you enjoyed this week's video, please hit that like button and subscribe for more weekly content on comic books and nerd stuff. I've been Eric, and you've been awesome.